America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. We had a few technical difficulties. It's very hard doing this show. I have like 17 jobs, and one of them is this. But there also was 16 others, and 3 kids under 5, and but it works because I need to give the people what they need to know in order to get what we're due. So let's just go right to work. There was one of the school board members, a guy named Greg Davis. Yeah, Davis. Posted a very interesting stat about Athens, Clarke County. And like I said, this is going to be black politics, particular to Athens, Georgia. But if it works here, that means it'll work in Gainesville, it'll work in Columbus, it'll work in Columbia, in South Carolina, might even work in St. Louis. So if we can figure out how to redistribute some money into black homes in Athens, I think the solutions we give here are going to be portable. So email this to your friends. And now I'm going to tell you about Greg Davis's insight, or the stat he saw. He saw, and this is one of our school board members, so I think it's kind of official. He said, look, I read a study, and it turns out that 4% of people in Athens, Georgia, Athens, Clarke County, born in poverty, make it stably to the middle class. And I'll say that again, 4% of people born in poverty in Athens, Georgia, make it to the middle class, stably into the middle class. So what that tells me is that we have large-scale political problems about the distribution of goods. And if you don't know anything about Athens, Georgia, it's about 130 to 180,000 people with a GDP north of $8.5 billion. So the problem isn't the money and the jobs that we produce. The problem is the distribution of goods. Right, and I'll say that again. The problem isn't the money and the jobs we produce, it's the distribution of goods. For example, there was a mechanic down in the nicer part of town. I believe it's called Schuler Motors. I would have gotten a graphic, but another day. Good. Another part of town, and it's a good mechanic shop, probably employs 25 to 30 people. It's a larger shop, and it's a lot. It's also the first call for any of the accidents that happen in town. It's also the first call for any of the accidents that happen in town, and it's also the first call for the university. Anytime their vehicles break down and they can't handle it in-house, they go to Schuler Motors. Would you believe the proprietor of that job, of that institution, is not black? Now that's not an issue that's a matter of black students not having physics education or not being able to do calculus or not being able to do higher level math. We don't have that position because that contract was probably sewn up a few generations ago, back when black people were being terrorized by the Klan. And it just gets passed on. And then you walk into this place and all the mechanics are white. And I suspect all the mechanics do not have upper level educations in terms of advanced degrees. But they have good white jobs, good middle class jobs, which means white jobs. And they're working in Athens, Georgia, and they probably live outside of town, who knows? But don't let people blame the black workforce for the fact that we don't have the quality of jobs that we disturb. Because all you have to do, apparently, I suspect, is be a 20-year-old idiot cousin of this family, and there will be a pipeline that emerges so that in 10 years you will be a mechanic. And I say this because honestly, I've had friends who actually go to this mechanic, use this mechanic, and their car still ends up broken at the end. Would you believe? So it's not that the superior care is getting done, it's the networks that have emerged to create a middle class life for this set of people who are not black in Athens, Georgia. So I want to say, first of all, that if we're going to have an education that's adequate to the 96% of people who are born in poverty in Athens, Georgia, and if anybody knows anything about Athens, Georgia, that poverty is racialized. So we're talking about a lot of black people. 30% of the town is black. Of that, we haven't done numbers because I talked to county people there. I think they're scared actually to run the numbers on black poverty because the poverty rate is anywhere between 32 and 38%. And the black poverty is probably hovering around 65, 70, maybe even higher, but I don't want to say any higher. It's definitely that. And I have enough educators in the room who aren't fuming about the number that they know is probably pretty accurate. So if you're black and in Athens, there's a pretty good chance that you're broke. And it's not just because you're broke, it's because like you come from broke people. All your people are broke. And that is not a problem with your technical education necessarily, because the town actually generates quite a bit of money. We have construction that's going on. The town is, the problem is in the distribution of goods. And Danielle Allen in Education and Equality, can you bring that? Education. Danielle Allen in Education and Equality, it's a wonderful little book, goes into the myths about education and what it can do with respect to the job market, and especially the political distribution of goods. It's a fantastic book. Good. It's a fantastic book. Go ahead and pick it up. So she's a good scholar. I've read some other things that she's written by her. Pick up this book because it actually goes into the myth of what education can do with respect to making equality, and why equality is important, because it turns out if you're in a markedly unequal society, you end up being food for the people on top. If you're on the bottom, you're vulnerable in a million different ways to the people on top. So inequality is bad for both political and economic reasons. And education to rectify inequality isn't necessarily a technical education. It's an education in the political distribution of goods, because we want the first call contract for both the University of Georgia and for the city. If you get in an accident in one of the streets, we want that first call to be to a black mechanic, right? Or at least we want at least 30% of those calls to go to a black mechanic in a black tow yard. So we don't own land, so we're gonna have to need the city to give us a little bit of a grant with respect to land. Not a loan, a grant, because you terrorized us out of the land. So I want the land, no strings attached, in the city, so we can have a nice thriving business with respect to both the university contracts and the city contracts. And we need the quality of black citizenry to advocate for these contracts, and the quality of white citizenry not to be so graspy with respect to your ill-got gains. Because you happen to have not been terrorized a few generations ago when this was all sewn up. So we need a quality of political education. What she calls is participatory readiness. We need a quality of education that will make people ready to participate in the political and social sphere in order to get the goods that we need. Not just a technical education, because the problem isn't a technical education. There are black people all over these United States with enormous loan bills for the sake of a technical education, but would you believe they still can't get a job at Schuler Motors because that goes to white cousins? So the technical education is good, but telling black people that merely a technical education that will ready them for the workplace will get them that job or get them that contract or get them to be the first call is just not honest. It's not an honest education. It's not an honest education with respect to the history of racial and honestly gender politics in the United States. Now, before people say why is Army taking a whole show to bag on white women? Why is Army taking a whole show to bag on white women? I'm going to show you something. Show me the. I want to see the Freedom Caucus. Freedom Caucus. So this is blow it up big. This is the Freedom Caucus of the United States. These are the people who sat in a room and decided healthcare policy. Right? They sat in a room and decided what the shape of your healthcare was going to look like. And all over social media, our president, Donald Trump, was rightly pilloried for saying, by what right does this group of men decide healthcare policy for the United States? And it's not because and I think they were the people, and I was one of them, who said this is a problem. And it's not because, the women who are dismayed by this picture and the power that this group was wielding over their bodies and over their policies wanted someone who looked like them in the room. It wasn't just that. They just know men. They know white men, and they know the history of white men in political power who might not be sensitive to the needs of the 52% of Americans who are women with respect to health care. So it's not that they wanted someone who looked like them in the room. They wanted to make sure that their needs were represented at the level of policy. So anybody who says that, like, there's a weaker argument that says, black kids, they need to see someone who looks like them teaching them. That is an argument, kind of, but that's not the argument I'm going to give. I'm going to talk about the history of the way white femininity has emerged as a gender construct with respect to the racialized other, which is us. So, and I have a new opening. So Matthew, hit the opening. No, you have to send it over. So the opening didn't play, but I think it's stellar. We'll figure it out as we figure it out. Go ahead and click on the folder and play the opening just in VCL to see if it actually plays. All right, so we're going to talk about women. We're going to talk about white women and the origin of femininity in the Western world. And then we'll see why this is a problem. It's not just about black students needing teachers who look like them and administrators who look like them. Although that's, not nothing, but it's not the biggest deal. The biggest deal is we're going to see how in the United States and in the Western world, what we consider a woman is a racialized concept, and it's not always the friend of black people. So I'm going to tell you a little story. So gather around, people. Gather around, people. People at home, we're going to talk about the 19th century. So in the 19th century, all of a sudden you have entire discourses where the idea of woman and the modern period, but it really gets racialized toward the end of the middle, pretty much when black people start being free. Right? When we have to start justifying colonialism and black people start being free, and we got to figure out how to do colonialism better. So like 16th to 1860 is when this discourse starts getting real. All right, so this all starts with patriarchy. So white women watching at home and in the audience, be confident that this ends with an indictment of patriarchy. Be not so confident that this ends with an indictment of women being the handmaids of patriarchy. So white men start looking at women and thinking, well, we've just invented rights and we have rights, so let's think of women as property, and then we have a right to them. We can do with them what we want to. And that's horrible, except they're a particular kind of property. They're a kind of private property where I actually need them to sometimes at least want to have sex with me and raise little white men. So I think of women as property, but they're a particular kind of property. I can't just have them be destroyed. I need them to actually they're an important kind of property, and I need to take care of my property because white guys. I'm in the South. White guys take their property very seriously here. Would you believe they have their hands? So we think of women as property, and that's a problem for all the reasons you can imagine. However, they're a special kind of property where they are vulnerable, and since they raise children and raise little white boys and girls, they're vulnerable, but they also have the capacity to teach and educate children, right? And they have the capacity to teach and educate children, not because they themselves are particularly educated, because we can't respect their intellect, because if we start respecting their intellect, it's kind of hard to treat people as property as if you respect their intellect. So they have this capacity to teach children. They have this capacity, they're vulnerable, and their innocence is what gives them a moral superiority. Their innocence from the violent world of outside of the house. They're innocent, they're fragile, they're morally superior, and they're innocent of politics and industry, which is like where all the violence, the corrupting powers of violence of the world. They're innocent from that corruption. So in that way, they can teach children and have the domestic hearth as like a bastion of civilization. You come home to the civilized world, and then you go out to the uncivilized world. So we need to keep women in the civilized world of domesticity that they're very good in maintaining, right? So we have this picture of womanhood that emerges, of civilized womanhood, as fragile, vulnerable to politics and industrial life, and morally superior because of that innocence, right? And so that emerges as a marker of civilization. That emerges, in other words, that emerges as a class marker. That distinguishes women who are like richly gendered and white from the uncivilized other, which would either be in Australia. There's a great book by R.W.S. Carnell called Masculinities, about the variety of masculinities. The variety of masculine. Not all masculinity is hegemonic masculinity. You know, not everyone wants to like, you know, shoot guns and lynch black people. Like some masculinities are actually like lovely. Like the hegemonic masculinity is a problem. The other masculinities are like the kinds of masculinity we want of our sons. And so Carnell like has this book, which is actually pretty rigorously worked out, about how like, look, the working class, the very, very poor in Australia are actually like not hegemonic. Very, very poor men, they actually have egalitarian relationships because their masculinity comes as a response to hegemonic masculinity of their bosses. So like their masculinity, they're not patriarchal. They're men, they're just not hegemonic and patriarchal. They actually have egalitarian relationships. However, as you go up the class line, the relationships become more and more unequal. So like let's think about what I just said. Equality between genders, equality between sexes actually at this level, is a sign of uncivilized humanity, whereas inequality starts being a class marker. So you get people striving for unequal relationships. And like if you know anything, and I know my audience is very educated, like this shouldn't be that foreign of a concept because we know about China and the bound feet and like as a marker of like, well, you know, if you're at the higher class, you shouldn't have to walk. So like the idea that unequal relationships between genders is a class marker and is a racialized class marker because real women are innocent from the political industrial world. So, and they're naturally morally superior, not because of a feat of intellect and insight into like the morality of the whole, but because of some sort of natural endowment that's buttressed by their innocence. That becomes a powerful motif. And when women in the 19th century start fighting for rights, they fight for rights as women. They fight for rights as women. And to fight for a right as a woman means that they were fighting for rights to be colonizers alongside men. So this is where you get like, so there's a problem. It turns out that anybody who's traveled knows this, especially traveled to a developing nation. If you drop white men anywhere, they start like screwing native populations. So they're very adaptable that way. It's a special power. There's a term for it, a term of art I learned when I visited Indonesia. It's called sexpats, not expats, sexpat, because like, you know, grimy white guys, you drop them in a third world country, they start doing what they do, especially if they have a sense of hegemonic masculinity. And so that wasn't very good for the colonial project. However, and this was the argument women were making in the 19th century, if you bring women alongside them, they would bring the civilization with them. So these white men, in their adaptability, would not just be like, you know, sex patting all over the countryside. They would actually be like domesticated through the moral superiority of the women who were brought along. So white women started advocating that like we could be colonizers, we can colonize as well as our husband, and by that right, we should be given the vote. By that right, we should be seen as equal with our husbands relative to a racialized other. And this discourse is all over 18th and 19th century colonial powers. Like this was what feminism looked like in the colonial sphere. So now in America, anybody who knows a modicum of Southern history knows that in this domicile, white women were in charge of domesticating the black servants, the house Negroes, right? So like all of the mean discipline, there's stories of rape and castration and all of the things we normally disassociate with men. Turns out women are just as bad. We just don't talk about it that way because we've naturalized their moral superiority. Not because they've deserved it, they're just as bad as guys, except we've imparted this natural moral superiority and fragility, and we've sequestered them in the house, so they were awful to the domestic help. Absolutely awful to the domestic help as they were domesticating them from savages into servants, right? So it shouldn't be that hard. You know women, people at home, they're just as bad as guys. And the idea is that they're not just as bad as guys is naive. And it actually, it furthers racist white women are just as bad as racist white men. It shouldn't be that. That's the kind of feminist I am. I said, like, they're actually equally bad. They're equally bad. So that's the kind of feminist I am. So women were domesticating servants, and they were instructing servants, not with respect to wisdom, because it's not like they, were sitting at home reading Plato and thinking about like bigger issues of politics or actually innocent of politics, but with respect to manners that were received and conventions that were received. And from this natural knowledge, they attained a kind of moral authority, and they wanted to bring that moral authority onto the colonial project as emancipated women. And guys were like, governments were like, you know what? We actually are better at this colonial game if we bring whole entire families. And so, like, in the colonial project, like, women were out there, being just as hard to foreign Africans as they were to American slaves here. And that was how gender started to emerge as a construct. And remember the qualities: vulnerability to the political industrial world, natural moral authority, and the ability to civilize and bring savages to that place of like, if you're a natural savage, let's see, people ask me about like what's the difference between progressive white supremacist women and conservative white supremacist women. And I say, well, conservative white supremacist women think that they can go into schools and teach black kids to be slaves, to be good domestic help. Progressive white supremacist women think they can go and teach black kids to be equals, just not now, just sometime in the future. Not sometime in the indeterminate future. So that's the difference between like how white supremacy works in gender, I think. But other people smarter than I am. And first of all, I'm going to put up some books. Give me the Kaplan. Give me the Kaplan piece, which is the first long, 21922. Okay, not that one. Well, give me the Mary P. Ryan. All right, so this is Mary Ryan, a historian who's arguing pretty much what I'm saying very well. And there's another one, Amy Greenberg, and like I said, a wonderful book by Louise, Michele Newman. You can put up the Newman book. If anything I'm saying, like, it sounds provocative, check out these books because they lay it out in a format that's not quite fit for YouTube, but is very eloquent. And they say, like, look, we needed to create women in a way that put them against savages. And all three of them, and Tommy Curry's new book, The Man Not, like the consensus in the scholarship is that these qualities of vulnerability to the political and industrial world, moral superiority that's naturalized, and the ability to teach it was just in our ideas of what a woman was. And it was a class marker, so people started to aspire to be that. Now, it was also kept in the domestic realm, so white women needed to, we wanted out of the domestic realm, so they brought with them all of that baggage, all of that dignity, actually, not just baggage, it was where they got their dignity into the world, and that's where we get a slew of educators, missionaries, cultural ethnographers, and white women being professionals in a way that put them in the place of civilizers. The modern version of this is your white nonprofit exec. And honestly, the rot is so deep that like entire programs that are supposed to civilize people in one way, shape, or form or another have been co-opted by naturalizing white women as somehow having some sort of special insight into civilizing and the project of civilizing. When it turns out and this all goes back to, are they actually preparing these kids for self-determination? Are they actually preparing these children to take their cut of contracts? Are they actually preparing these children to change the 4% into 78%? Or are they training these children to like strive and be part of the 4%? Because you can't do both at the same time. You can either try to be part of the 4% or you could organize to change that math. You can't both train for the Hunger Games and break the game. So are you, and I'll look right in the camera, white women watching this at home, because I want you guys to email this to each other. Are you training your children your students for self-determination? And since this is naturalized, are you accountable to reason in your pedagogy? Or if the first time you read this, you're going to go, no, I'm obviously doing right because like I just know what I'm doing. I know what wisdom is. No, if you don't know how the political operations of your city works, like you shouldn't be teaching kids because your goal is to teach them to wield the quality of political power that'll get justice for their people. So like if you're politically innocent or you think teaching them manners is going to move that number from 4% to 78%, get out of my school. You're screwing it up. And if you're teaching other teachers not to teach kids to be the quality of political actors who will demand power from your husbands and your sons, you're a pox on our education. You need to get out of my school. So let me make no mistake. If you understand your role as educating black men to wield power over your husbands and sons, you might deserve the spot you have in your good middle-class job teaching black men and women teaching black students how to become black men and women, because that's the quality of education we need. We need the quality of education that will teach our community how to be citizens, which means wield power with and over white people who might not want to share it. Because the history of America is not a history of white people sharing political power. And if you're not preparing black students to do that, you're giving us a quality of education that's keeping us poor. You should be out of the school. And you definitely should not be paid by the state. Although, depending on who you talk to, that's your job. To keep black people poor and to keep black people vulnerable. That number is atrocious. And if you're getting a middle-class salary managing that number, or by telling black people that number is their fault, as opposed to the system, the number I'm talking about is the 4% number of black people born in Athens, Clarke County who move from poverty to the stable middle class. If you're telling them that that's a part of the black students' moral favor, as opposed to the history of white terrorism that governs Athens and most of the United States, then you're no better than actually the teachers over at Athens Christian. Give me the Athens Christians picture. Give me, blow that up. Blow that up. This is Athens Christian school. It's one of the white segregation academies that emerged, when we started desegregating schools in Athens. And apparently they teach Jesus over there. I think they teach white supremacy with a little bit of Jesus. Okay, that's good. Get it back to me. I think people get the notice. I think they teach white supremacy with a little bit of Jesus kind of sprinkled in the way of like horseradish and seasoning. So you go to a school like that, you go to a school like Athens Christian, and you're learning white supremacy. And you're paying good money for it, because I think the tuition is between $20,000 and $30,000. But you look at that, and remember, Athens as a town is 30% black. So I think the parents and the teachers know exactly what they get when they go to a school like that, and they see the staff. They know exactly what they get. And not only that, they pay for it. So that quality of education, institutionalized white supremacy, is happening at a lower grade with any school that's not teaching black people how to wield power, how to wield political power. So we're going to go to, and I'm going to finish this story because I think it's a good story. So we have natural moral superiority, natural vulnerabilities, because they have to be taken care of. Very fragile flowers. I suspect if you ask slaves, or actually some people in 5 Point who have help, and if you ask their help, it turns out the white women are not that fragile. They have very severe ideas about how they like their civilization. So we're talking about natural moral superiority, a natural vulnerability, and political innocence, and the ability to teach that in others. And Melissa Stein argues this in her book, The Mismeasurement of Man. You can go ahead and put that book up. That once we emancipated them from the house, turns out that now we needed to make all of society safe for white women who reproduce white men. So what happens is you get a police state that emerges from the emancipation. And like Melissa Stein's a white historian. This isn't me talking. This is white women who study white women and say white women are pretty bad, or at least just as bad as white men. Except we have a cognitive block in thinking of them that way. And they definitely have a cognitive block in thinking of themselves as that way. No, my husband's a problem with patriarchy. No, actually, you are too. We know 53% of white women voted for Trump, and this is 2 weeks after he said he can just grab them in the crotch. Black women didn't, and black people didn't. So that's your president. You're gonna have to aim that, and talk to your cousins, because they're a problem. So now that we let white women out of the house, I'm all for that. We had to make society safe for that, so it ended up leading to a police state, and so slave catchers, and the modern notion of cops comes from the policing of black bodies. So if you know a white lady teacher who teaches in public school who's married to a white guy cop, and you think that that's an accident, or you think that might be good for the American Negro, that's not good for the American Negro. That's just a modern expression, or the contemporary expression of the same logic of white supremacy, the way colonialism and the racial hierarchy was established and maintained for the history of the modern world. White women school teachers, white guy cops, men in charge of law and order, women in charge of the moral education of an inferior race. Whether the inferior race was naturally inferior and could only aspire to be servants, or if you're progressive, the way the inferior race was contingently inferior, and sometime in some indeterminate time in the future we'll be able to share power with them. That future never comes. White people just don't share power with black people, and that's why we're in the state we are in the United States. Not voluntarily, we can take it, but we need the quality of education that teaches black people how to take white power, and the quality of education that teaches white men and women that they are owed, that black people are owed. Now I'm going to read a bit. Good, we're still fine on time. I'm going to read a bit from Newman's book, because you'll often get, and give me Newman part 1. This is the book, White Women's Rights. So I'm going to read a bit from this book, and White Women's Rights. By the way, this is a fantastic book. You need to be kind of smart to read it. So if you're just a dilettante, then get out of my schools. So like if you can teach black kids, you should be able to read this book. But if you think you can teach black kids, but you can't read this book, then you can't teach black kids. Your superiority has like been a product of all these institutions that have validated like your moral wisdom, which isn't particularly wise, and not wise enough to, if, like I said, not read this book or teach black kids the quality of politics they'll need in order to get the justice we're due, and teach white kids the quality of politics they'll need in order to do justice to black America. So that's why I advocate for this. Like, you're not going to catch me advocating for like black people just take your kids out of school, because one, you need a whole infrastructure to homeschool that's just not consistent with black life. Two, the problem isn't the education of black kids, it's the education of white teachers who go on to educate also white kids. And this is a good time to say that, honestly, and I've heard this from white teachers and black teachers, white women are the gatekeepers to public education in America. And I'll say this again, white women are the gatekeepers to public education in America. That means not only teachers, but teacher training and, honestly, curriculum decisions. So like, and implementation, because look, I teach philosophy at the University of Georgia, and I teach a lot of ancient philosophy, but somehow at the end of my class on the Republic or on Plato or on Aristotle, kids seem to know how to do justice to black people in America. So it's not just, if you tell me that like the problem is a state mandated curriculum, no, you could wield in justice for black people under the current curriculum if you actually knew the historical position of whiteness in America. If you actually knew the historical position of women in America and what it is to be a woman in America, which is a gendered and racialized category that was tied to this innate moral knowledge, vulnerability, and the ability to teach it to others. And the problem with it being innate is, which means it's not accountable to reason. Which means a lot of you will only hear this if it's spoken from another white woman. Because like, you're gonna look at me and just think, well, he can't know what he's talking about, or I'm not that person. You totally are that person. If you didn't know, if anything that I'm telling you right now is new and you didn't know it, and honestly, if you talk to your friends and they can't hear it, or you can't hear it, then like you are that person. You think your moral authority is a matter of like natural niceness, when that's just where the seed of your ignorance comes from. And in order to be moral anything, you need to actually study. You need to study justice. You need to study politics. You need to study like the way industrial labor works. So like if you think you can teach people justice or teach people to be good without teaching them to be just because of some moral authority of your feelings, you're just a product of a system of femininity that has taught you that your feelings have authority. Now, I know you're not going to hear this from me, but maybe like Brené Brown will see this video and say it, like Elizabeth Gilbert will write a book about what I'm saying right now, and then you'll be able to hear the truth of what I'm saying. But as it stands, like I'm just giving you white women historians who've put this together. And right now I'm going to give you, and you're ready to put up part one? I'm going to give you, and then cue up part two to come next. Of course. All right. So the national romance with colorblindness and its corollary, gender sameness, is a fundamentally misguided strategy. An ineffective way to address the real discursive effects of social hierarchies, intricacies structured along the multiple axes of race, class, and gender. The favored approach of the U.S. legal system in questions of legal equality, treating similar situated individuals similarly, works only when individuals are indeed similarly situated. I typed this up myself, so all typos in me, not in the book. I have a lot to do besides teaching white women not to be women the way they're taught to be women. That's just my side gig. Because I care about my people. Now, part two. But what if they were differently situated? Right? So we teach people to be equally, teach people to treat people who are equals, who are equally situated. But what if they're not equally situated? What if they're differently situated in the context of American political culture in which power is already aligned along gendered, racialized, and class lines? People of different races, classes, and genders are always already situated differently. To assert sameness is to purposefully ignore the material and ideological effects that race, gender, and sexuality have had in creating oppression, inequality, and injustice. So when you say that, like, I treat all my kids the same, you're a problem. You're a problem. You're a huge problem. You're reproducing the 96% of people born in poverty who will stay in poverty. Like, you're a problem. You're saying that the reason that their life isn't going to work out as well as it should work out is because of some moral failing that they're either going to express or inchoate expressing, but it's not the problem of the system that birthed them. And that is a problem because you get a lot of black people blaming themselves. When, as if they're going to be appropriately educated, they wouldn't blame themselves. They would blame, the society that like racialized all the wealth and power in the United States, right? So this one's a fun one. Do the long number, 21192. We have this illusion, like I said, that white women are progressive. And do it up big so the people at home see. And I guess I'll read it off. Because they probably can't see in the studio audience. We have this illusion that white women are progressive because, women are just nice, right? But it turns out that it's not the 53% that voted for Trump. It's not an anomaly. So the problem isn't the illusion that white women are more liberal than their male counterparts, or especially black men. The problem isn't the way they vote or the way they conduct their lives, or the striking preponderance of white women who teach in Clark County but live in Oconee County or Gwinnett because of the schools. The problem isn't that these people exist. The problem is we don't have a category to account for them. Like, we think they're more progressive than they are, when they're really just as awful as their husbands. Like, give me and like not nearly as good as black men. Black men, like, you'd have your childcare, you'd have your education, and you'd have real anti-poverty programs that like moved people out of generational wealth into poverty. But like, if we were in charge of things, so it's actually like we just have to assume that no, the problem isn't we don't have enough women in charge. The problem is we have as many white women in charge as we have men in some aspects of what it is to be in charge. And the public education aspect is that aspect. Go over to terrorism. I'm going to speak for a little bit. Go over to terrorism and get me the picture of the planning board again. So the illusion that white women are somehow more liberal or progressive or wiser than their husband or more just than their husbands is just that, an illusion. It's a pernicious illusion insofar as we can't hold them accountable because it's a naturalized wisdom. We can't hold them accountable because like we've given authority to their feelings. And we have erected entire institutions that have given authority to white women's feelings. And that's a problem in the education of black people for political power. So blow that picture up real big. So some people will look at this picture. This is the Planning Commission of Athens, Clark County, and they decide land use, including which trails go through which black which black neighborhoods in Athens, and what gets zoned in a black neighborhood in Athens. And some people will look at that picture and think of progress, because that picture used to be all white men. But for black people, that is not an improvement. That is not an improvement. Now, we need women on that board because it turns out if you put, can you give it back to me? We need women on that board because it turns out if you put all men there, you'll get more sporting stadiums and not as many like parks with playgrounds. So like you need women on the board. You also need one. It'd be nice to have some black women on the board. Two, just assuming that white women will fix your justice issues by putting them in positions of power is just a naive assumption. When history will say they're part of the colonial project. They're part of the project of they're part of the racial caste system. And womanhood has emerged as an integral part of the racial hierarchy because it teaches, it's part of the colonial project that wasn't in charge of law and order, that was men, but in charge of moral education. And in charge of it in a way that, yeah?
The request to slow down just a little bit, you're outpacing people's ability to take notes.
Oh, okay. How many people do we have watching?
Right now,
About 100?
About 145.
145, all right. Well, good. At home, look, you need to share this video to your social networks. Let's go on your Facebook, go on your tweet it out to your friends. This is very important what I'm doing here. Because I need to train black people. First of all, you need to train your kind of kids who will be able to say what I'm saying to their white teachers and their white administrators and their white, yeah. And we need to train the kind of parents who will get their kids back when all hell breaks loose and all their teachers start crying. No, I'm not a racist. No, you're not a racist on purpose. You're just a racist by habit. Go back to Gwinnett. You're just a racist by habit. You're just a racist because we train, because your idea of what it is to be a woman is racialized. You think you're more vulnerable than you are, and to us. And that's why there was another report that came out, all the teachers in the room know this, but at home, it turns out, big surprise, but it's just consistent with every other report that's come out in the last 30 years, that white women teachers disproportionately punish black people. And I bet if you dig deeper, it's black boys. Yeah. White teachers disproportionately punish black boys. Black people in general, but black boys. And there isn't a serious, and they don't do it in a way that pushes for a serious anti-poverty legislation, or do it in a way that that pushes for serious empowerment of the black community. They do it in a way because they thought they could be both vulnerable enough. They thought they have the moral authority and expertise to teach in a school that's predominantly black, but yet not have to deal with the issues that emerge when you teach in a school that is predominantly black. So you're just not up to the job, white women. If you are disproportionately writing up black students, you're in the wrong job, even though that everything in society tells you that as a woman and as a nice one, you could teach. No, that's not the job for you. You're not ready for that. Quit. It's better than suspending us. Just quit. Just hand in your papers. And if you think that the state owes to pay you to screw up teaching black boys, no, you're not good at your job. And it's not a measure of the black boys you're writing up. It's a measure of your fragility, the fragility that you think that you're entitled to. So you're just not up to the job. If you're writing up black boys, you're not up to the job. So go back through your roles, see who you've sent to the the vice principal, because that's a great way to say that I'm not doing it to vice principal. I just send them there. It's like cops saying that I don't decide who goes in jail. I just arrest people. No, it's your fault. You know what happens when you send them to the vice principal. So if you can't handle your business, then you shouldn't be handling our business in the black community. So what I'm going to do is ask you to bring up. So like I said, when I hear women give me the officer 19, officer 1119. So when I hear people come back from the women's march saying that see, if people just march like us, there would be justice in the world. There was no looting, there was no rioting, there was no, we did it right. The men just need to learn from that. I think, well, yeah, that just goes with the colonial logic. Of course, nice white women get along with nice white cops. Of course they're well protected, because you're not threatening. You're part of the same project, which is keeping us in our place, which is exploiting black poverty and raising boys. Give me the black officer picture. Is that? Yeah. Is that? Do you know what picture I'm talking about? Yeah. Good. And you're in charge. Your job is to raise black boys who will eventually go along with that project. Go ahead, just put it big. So that's your job. These are the 4%. Your job is to raise 4% who will also put on the hat and let you off the hook for voting for Trump. Like, that's your job. Your job is to create nice little, like, polite Negroes who will go along with the system that your husbands and your uncles have organized, because you're not training them for self-determination. And also, give me the what's PPB? Yeah, no, this is another one of the people, this is another officer that apparently were resisting. So when I hear about the resistance, I'm like, yeah, these people don't look like they're particularly being resisted. You're part of the same project. You're part of the same project. And so don't tell me again about how, like, well-behaved women or, like, women who don't loot and women who don't riot will, like, lead to the quality of justice that black people need. Because you're in league with each other and you're treated like that, which is fine for what it is. Just don't tell me we're all in the same time. Now, a lot of times I get called divisive. People get divisive. To be clear, divisive is the new N-word. We're already divided. Next time you call me divisive, I'm going to call you something that you're not going to like. And I know all the words. So we're already divided. What I am doing is uncovering the divisions that we need to work through in order to heal and be made whole. All right? We're already divided. What I'm doing is uncovering the illusion that we're united so we can look at the divisions and finally be made whole. Black people were not made whole in the United States. And the symbolic president of the one Negro who became president does not move those poverty numbers. And what those poverty numbers tell you is that when there's such inequality, and the inequality I'm talking about is wealth inequality, not income inequality, although income inequality is also ridiculous. Wealth inequality, because for the next 30 years, wealth is how money moves in the United States. The money was made by, like, your parents and grandparents. That old uncle that voted for Trump, who you just think is an awful, awful human being, you will take his inheritance. And you will buy a house in the suburbs while you're commuting in to teach black kids how to be nice. So let's not pretend. Yeah, I know that one gets a little close. I know my audience that gets a little close. That's fine. It's not your fault. What I'm going to do, all right, so I'm going to need you to go over to thefunkyacademic.com and kick in on the, because the quality of education I'm giving you is, one, a little bit dangerous. I had to take out a life insurance policy because I want my people to be, I want my family to be okay if something were to happen to me. And let's be clear, I'm very healthy. I just did the physical for this life insurance policy. They took blood. I am very healthy. I ran a marathon a few years ago. I bike everywhere I go. If I suddenly drop dead, I was poisoned. I did not, if I get hit on my bicycle, I did not fall off my bicycle. I was hit. And to be clear and go home, let it be known, when you see these black pastors who've been given good checks by the Chamber of Commerce to come out and say that, like, we all need to heal and forgive, I don't forgive anybody for anything. No, I'm going to go black. I don't forgive nobody for nothing. Don't let anyone forgive anyone on my behalf because of what happened to me for doing this show. I need you to burn it down. Shut it down. And start in 5 Points. Start in Oconee. Go right to the middle of Watkins Hill and start throwing bricks. Shut it down. And Winder, go to Peachtree City. I need you to go and like shut down. There will be no justice if anything happens to me. And that's all across the United States. Like I said, I'm doing this for Mobile. I'm doing this for Columbus. I'm doing this for St. Louis. That means all those cities, if anything happens to me for doing this show, I need fire in the streets in all those cities. Right? So, and then tell everybody else that too. So, like, people won't get ideas about how they could snuff me out and it'll all go away. No, if they snuff me out, I need it to be louder. And let them know now that if they snuff me out, there will be no peace and there will be no forgiveness until we are made whole. And the price isn't just going to be 30% contracts to black businesses and hiring managers. The price is going to be like, I need some buildings coming down. And not black buildings, white ones. All right, so just keep me healthy and we won't have problems. Now, if we keep me funded, I'll be able to deliver the quality of political education we all need because, all this takes money. All this takes money. And I need a bigger spot. I have people standing. Can you give me the second camera? Like, I got a room full of white teachers, and they're all standing. And I'm sitting down like a real gentleman would, don't worry about it. They get the hint. Anyway, the studio's full of standing white people, or has enough standing white people. So I need a bigger space, and I need to buy a bigger space. So if you have a lead on where I can get about 80 or 90 grand, I don't want a loan for it. I want the check. So Bertus, if you're watching this, some of that stand money could create a black middle class. Or if any of you guys know Bertus, that means you're also rich too. So I need you to go to www.thefunkyacademic. One, sign up for a membership, kick down for $50 a month. You could also kick down to $5, $10, but there's that 50 option. And let's be honest, your uncle has the money and it'll all come back when he goes down. So kick down for that $50 a month option. Or at least kick down for the $5 or $10 a month option. Also, if you know how I can get the $80, $90, $100,000 to actually buy a studio that will fit people. Because also, I want more black people in the audience, but I need to be able to feed my people. I want to feed. It's a 4 o'clock in the afternoon show, so in a well-ordered world, when you email this around and they go to the Funky Academic and they sign up for membership, there'll be food for the show and there'll be food for the show and childcare because it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So there should be 4 o'clock. There should be childcare in the room next door or the park next door. So I want to be able to pay for childcare. I want to be able to pay for food, and that's only going to happen if you go to the website and kick down. So before I open this up, I want to just remind people that one, Louise Newman's book is great. Mary Ryan's book is great. Amy Kaplan. These are all people you should look for. 2, assumed moral superiority, fragility, and the ability to teach it to other people in a way that can't be contested. Because remember, this is naturalized moral superiority. I can't have a conversation with these white teachers and say, actually, you need to change your curriculum. They're going to be like, no, I'm teaching them nice. I'm teaching them to be colorblind. When actually, you're part of the problem. And the last one, I'm going to put up meritocracy. So here's the deal. When you teach people that the world is colorblind, it turns out when you teach kids that the world is colorblind and what they should do is just try harder, and when it doesn't work out and when they figure this out, it actually hurts them because they start blaming themselves for things they shouldn't blame themselves for, and then they start doing riskier behaviors because they figure I'm just not smart enough to be in this world. So they start there's a great article in The Atlantic, Why the Myth of Meritocracy Hurts Kids of Color. And it's pretty much, it's a story about how white teachers end up blaming black kids for being black. And when they teach them that the world is colorblind. And if they try hard, they too can be part of the 4%. Instead of saying no, I'm going to train you to change this 4% into 84%. And in order to do that, we're going to watch Malcolm X. So in order to do that, we're going to watch a wonderful movie I saw on Showtime for the second time. I saw it 10 years. I saw it about 10 years ago when it came out, and I started as a labor organizer. Go ahead and put my union pick up there. In another world, I was a labor organizer, and would you believe I was a very good one? And there's a movie about A. Philip Randolph. He was also, if you don't know who A. Philip Randolph is, but you're teaching black people, stop. And then email your teachers, email your master's program teachers who told you that you were qualified to teach black people and you didn't know, but not know who A. Philip Randolph is, and tell them that they're bad at their job. A. Philip Randolph was a black union organizer who organized the Pullman Porters. Wonderful movie about him called 10,000 Men Named George. track it down, pay the $15 to buy it off Amazon. I have a copy. If you know me, I'll grab it to you. It's actually really good, and I think it should be shown in classes. And if you're not, so if white teacher, if you don't know who A. Philip Randolph is, that means you're not teaching your kids who A. Philip Randolph is, which means you're not empowering them with the quality of history they need to get their justice. And that's a problem. So learn the things you need to learn. Take this weekend, read the books you need. Quit. Read the books you need to, then go back. Or you need to advocate for me to give. If you're in Athens, you need to advocate for me to give an entire series to your teachers who teach black people how to be good to white people. Because that's what, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's what you end up doing. And there is another study, the One Black Teacher, says it turns out that if a student has one black teacher, the graduation rates markedly improve. One black teacher. So why don't we have more black teachers? And why aren't you advocating to get more black teachers? And not well, we tried and we asked. No, you need a pipeline, a serious political pipeline. And don't tell me, well, I'm not very that political. Well, then you can't do your job. Because what we need is teachers who are actually political and will advocate for students and actually teach students to advocate for themselves. So if you think you can do this job, but not be political, to just kind of work with your church, then no, quit. You're a problem. You're a pariah, and somehow we've paid for you to be bad at your job, but that needs to stop because I'm tired of black generational poverty. So the study says pretty much one black teacher, graduation rates go up. Graduation rates go up. And also, the next time you have a sub, go to YouTube, play this video for the class. It's about an hour long. You can just get the first half. What's the problem? Why are you scared to do that? You're going to have to ask yourself that and ask your class that. Lastly, give me Fred Hampton. Give me Fred Hampton. And we're talking about the quality of education that we need in order to get the justice we need. Oh, okay. Do you not have the video? Do we not have the video? Liberalism. No, we don't have the video. We don't have. Anyway, all right. So I'll play it another time. Moral superiority, naturalized, so it can't be contested. Fragility, which, white women aren't that fragile. You want to know vulnerability? Ask a black kid who's scared of getting written up. Ask a black kid who's just been punched by a white woman or a black woman who now has to say that she punched me, but she started it. That's what vulnerability is. Nobody's going to believe that black kid. You want vulnerability, I don't know. There's another book called The Man Not, but it's written by Tommy Curry. It's about black male vulnerability. And it's actually a wonderful book. Once again, you got to be kind of smart to read it because he uses a lot of words. But if you're not smart enough to read it, then you definitely shouldn't be teaching black kids. And now I'm going to open it up for, looks like I forgot to get the phones ready. So we're just going to do the microphone here. So give it to me. Open it up. And I need you to teach black kids to be the quality of citizens who can participate. So if you are scared to participate here, imagine what it's like to be the black kid who has to go and give the planning commission what for. So get your ass to the microphone. You got a question? Yeah, come on.
Nobody else?
Yeah.
All right. Always the thing. So I'm really interested in this idea that we need a different quality of education in order to get the justice we need.
Right.
But how do we get that quality of education, right? So we've talked about a couple different ways. We've talked about, teachers can quit. All the teachers who aren't already giving this quality of education or aren't capable of giving it. But then we have 6 teachers left in Clark County teaching a class size of 1,000 each.
Well, I get an 18th job.
And then we have the, teachers can change what they're doing.
Right.
Or we have the more systemic thing of we change the way we train teachers.
We need to change. I mean, this ends with teacher training.
Right, but if we need the quality of education to get to the political power we need, we also need political power to get the quality of education. And we're stuck in this chicken and egg thing.
Yeah, we are. So we need you go into the Board of Education saying that this is how I'm going to implement these standards because I believe in creating in Athens, I believe I teach a lot of black kids, and I need to be able to teach them about political justice. On the USB, there is a clip from Mercer Baratheron. I think it's called Baratheron. It might be it's in terrorism. Yeah, look in terrorism. You see it? No, it should be. What about the top of the USB? No. Okay, I guess it's not on that USB. It's on a different one. We need to teach people about race, and we need to teach teachers how to talk about race. You have it?
Yeah.
All right. Give it, cue it up and play it. We need to teach teachers about race. We need to teach teachers to be able to talk about race. And we need to cover teachers who do talk about race, which means we need to put pressure on administrators to allow teachers to talk about race. Because people say, like, well, the state standards. No, like I said, I teach Plato. And somehow, while I teach Plato, my white kids from the suburbs of Atlanta all end up with a pretty good lesson in black politics. So you can implement the quality of education black people need under the standards that we have. You're just not because you're scared or you're untrained. So here's, like I said, a lot of people won't hear this from me for reasons, because they think they know things. But maybe you'll hear from Mercer Baratheron. Give me the clip.
We have to really understand that we have a racial divide, and a lot of that is rooted in history, a history that we have yet to confront. We need to confront that history. And on the policy aspect, the way to close the wealth gap, we know how to do it because we've done it for white Americans. We did it after the Great Depression. We know how to do it. It's a mixed economy, banks, government, you secure mortgages, you make them risk-free. We did it. It didn't cost very much money. It actually increased money, right? We just have refused to do it for black communities. And so if we're going to talk about it, we've got to talk about it in a way that is federal, large, and that targets the problem, which is segregation, concentrated poverty, all of that stuff. But it takes looking at the history in an honest way instead of saying, oh, well, Martin Luther King gave the speech, and now we aren't going to judge people by the color of their skin. And so, good, we're over. And, it's like the John Roberts rewriting. He says the way to stop racial discrimination is to stop discriminating based on race. And what he meant was we are now colorblind. And what we realized is we're actually not colorblind. We've never been colorblind. We have to see color again and look at it in a way that recognizes the history of color. We have to really understand that we have a racial divide. And a lot of that is rooted in history, a history that we have yet to confront. We need to confront that history. And on the...
Hello? Hi. So if you're teaching that colorblind history, can you give me the Obama? Is there, in the same folder, there should be an Obama. Yeah, give me the Obama clip. If you're not teaching that history, you're part of the problem. And if you're teaching people how to say things like this, you're also part of the problem. Give me the clip.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America. There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is.
So Barack Obama said what he said to get white people to vote for him. He didn't say what he said in order to actually create a black middle class, which is what I'm trying to do right here, and give the quality of education that will create a black middle class. So either one person is right. Either Mercer Baratheron is right or Barack Obama was right. And I'm pretty sure that all of the data, give me the wolf, should be in the same. I'm pretty sure that all of the data says that Mercer Baratheron was right. And Barack Obama was just telling white people what they needed to hear because he was very schooled in telling white people need to hear. Problem is, I need black people to have a middle class and not be stuck in generational poverty. And Barack Obama wasn't really about that life. So we're going to I'm going to open up the mic again. So yeah, this starts with advocating at your school board. Next time you're in a room with an elected official and someone's talking about campus care or someone's talking about Medicaid expansion or someone's talking about T-SPLOST, that's a transportation bill that's coming up in a special election here in Athens, Georgia. You need them also talking about what are we going to do to make sure that, one, the black community is made whole, and to make sure that our public education trains citizens into advocating for justice for black people, as opposed to training citizens into, assuming that we're colorblind. So we need to give teachers cover. By the way, if any teacher in Athens-Clarke County gets in trouble for teaching the quality, I'll do this right. All right, so I just spent the last hour telling teachers that they need to teach black people and teach white people about the history of either racial terrorism or maybe how white women might not be the best people to teach black children because of how they figured in colonialism in the history of America, and how we really don't have a mechanism to hold them accountable for the moral superiority we just assume they have as they teach our kids to be nice as opposed to do justice and demand justice. Now, if any teacher gets in trouble for teaching what I'm saying to their students, let it be known that that teacher's on the wrong, that the person who puts that teacher in trouble is on the wrong side of justice. So I want teachers to be able to teach what I'm saying. And if teachers get in trouble for teaching what I'm saying, we need to organize for those teachers, right? That's our duty. In this room, I will pledge to you, if you get in trouble, I got a room full of white teachers, if you're playing it out, I got a room full of white teachers. If you get in trouble for teaching the quality of justice and the quality of history, then not just me, but Mercer Baratheron, who's respectable, says you need to teach for us to get justice, for you to do justice for your black students, then I will organize on your behalf. So that's what I can pledge to you. You got to do your job. And also sign in the sign-in sheet. There should be a sign-in sheet floating around. Mm-hmm. Sign in the sign-in sheet so we can stay together. And thanks. All right, let's do a few more questions, and then we'll cut the show.
Yes. How you doing?
Okay, so give me. By the way, this is Broderick Flanagan. None of this is possible. None of this is possible without Broderick Flanagan. We're in the studio right now. Thank you. None of this is possible without Broderick Flanagan. We're in his studio right now. Broderick is a local artist. So if you have a wonderful, if Sophia needs art lessons because you think she needs to express herself, Broderick has very reasonable rates. You can just Google Broderick Flanagan Studios and his information will come up. Also, if you need a bit of public art or private art in your backyard or on the side of your house or your business, he has very reasonable rates. And he also, just because he's a working black man, has a few different jobs. He's also runs Enlightenment Media Productions, which is a connector for black businesses to white capital. So if you look around at your subcontractors who, turns out your subcontractors are white, and you would like to subcontract with black people, or even if you don't want to subcontract with black people, but you think you should, talk to Broderick for a very reasonable fee. He will set you as a connector and work with the black business to, he has a Rolodex of black businesses and contacts. He will hook you up. If you need a plumber, if you need someone to do your roof, if you need someone to cut your grass, if your daughter or aunt is getting married, and you need someone who's going to do hair, you do not have to use a black hairdresser. Let's move some money around. And in order to find a black hairdresser, talk to Broderick. He'll hook you up for a good percentage of the cut. Or a black photographer for that wedding. So yes, that's Broderick Flanagan. He's been in this space for 3 years, and he's the reason we can do this show. Give me the question, Broderick.
Thank you for the stimulating conversation. I used to be a substitute teacher myself here in Athens-Clarke County, so I witnessed a lot of this play out, firsthand. I mean, I won't tell any specific stories or call anybody out, but one of the things
You're also a student.
Yeah, also a student, born and raised here, went up through Clarke County School District, school system. And, so one of the things that you haven't really touched on yet, but that's part of the equation, I feel like, is what happened to those black institutions after integration, and what that did to the black community, and all those jobs that those teachers had and whatnot. Like, what were the effects of that? and how does that play into this this dilemma or this conversation that we're having?
All right. So there's a great podcast that Malcolm Gladwell did. That's a fantastic question, and it's in my notes, but like I don't have the right notes here. There's a great podcast that Malcolm Gladwell did on revisionist history, and the title has Mrs. Buchanan in it. And we can get the actual title, just shout it out to me. And he goes over, and this is short, and this is something that you should play for your kids, and you should play for. And, teachers should play this for other teachers, and like white people should just play it for each other. He goes over how everyone talks about Brown versus Board of Education, and how like, yay. Mrs. Buchanan's Period of Adjustment is the name of the title, is the name of the podcast. Everyone talks about Brown versus Board of Education. That integrated the schools. What that did was fired a lot of black teachers. A lot of black teachers lost their jobs because we had black schools and overqualified black teachers because the black teachers had all the degrees, but they were locked out of the labor market. So like you had like people with multiple advanced degrees teaching school because like you had like regular white women who just kind of like rolled out of bed and taught school. Then you had like black women who and black men who had like advanced degrees who were shut out of the labor market and taught school.
Also want to plug Michael Thurman's book, A Story Untold.
Okay, Michael Thurman's book, A Story Untold, goes into this a bit. So like a lot of black teachers lost jobs because of Brown v. Board, because we integrated the school, but we integrated from the students up, not from the top down. And real integration would have started at the school board, who decided the curriculum, and then principals, not vice principals, principals, and then teachers, and then you integrate the students. But like that asked white people to share power, and they went about that life. So like we just fired teachers. We fired a lot of black teachers. And this comes up in a case, Brooks versus Moberly. Another Kansas case that nobody talks about, where 12 teachers tried to get their jobs back because they were fired as a result of the Brown education, and they just tried to get like a fair share of their jobs in the new white school, but they lost. That's a case we lost because white people don't want to give up jobs. Those are good jobs. Teaching's a good job. Like you can buy a nice house in your little white flight. Well, you put your 77 cents with your husband's whole dollar, and you can go over to like Fleet Negroes. There's a huge industry in Negro management. You could study black people as a grad student. You could be a nonprofit exec for black people. White women do very well off of Negro poverty. There's a whole economy. We've got 600 nonprofits in Athens. Like there's a whole economy off of our poverty. Problem is, it's not giving us the political power to actually like stem poverty. So like it's a growth industry for like do-gooding white women who think that like they're not my equals now, but maybe sometime in the future, if I civilize them right, they will be. So we fired a lot of black teachers after integration, and the ones who stayed weren't really the ones you like. The ones who stayed weren't the ones who talked like I did. So I do. So we fired a lot of good black teachers. And that's unfortunate. And the ones who stayed were okay with the racial caste system, and that's also unfortunate. Because being okay with the racial caste system is a good way. It's pretty much the only best industry for black people in America. And it could even help you become president. All right, question. Yeah, microphone. The people at home need to see. Don't forget about the people.
Hey, I'm
what's up?
Julie Novak, and
Julie.
I am a public school teacher here in Clark County.
Yeah, what age range?
I am a special education teacher
a lot of
in
Negroes there.
second grade.
Yeah.
You're right, there are.
Yeah, that's what we
No,
should
and
do. Do you guys like who are we medicating? Is that a problem?
is what now?
Medicating. Are we medicating black kids?
Some people do, yeah. I think we medicate boys in general. But I mean, and I'm sitting here with two wonderful other white lady school teachers.
Good jobs. Good jobs as school teachers. Wish you were black.
Most of what I have to say is a comment, and I just want to say, first of all, thanks for doing this on a Friday when we were out of school. Otherwise, I probably couldn't have come.
Yeah, I'll have childcare and I need money.
Some things are hard to hear, even
Well, when Brene Brown says it, it'll be a little bit soft.
But no, honestly, I think that I put a lot of good into this world.
Right.
I adopted a black son, but, and I work hard and I believe that I stand up for rights of people, and yet I sit here and still things are hard for me to hear as a white person.
Right.
And so I'm leaving here today feeling not divided.
No.
At all. My coworkers aren't either.
Yeah.
I feel like I learned something today.
Good.
And I appreciate you having it.
Yeah.
It kind of opened up my thinking a lot. And
You're not married to a cop, are you?
Nope. I'm married to a philosopher who went to UGA as well.
Oh, one of my
but
people.
he's a bartender. That's how he makes his money.
Yeah.
But
Not at Beauregard's.
No, not at Beauregard's. I do want to say that as much as I feel like I have a lot to learn, there are some of us who are doing our best to learn. We really are. I'm probably not the target audience you wanted to come today.
No,
but
you're here.
I hope, I can think of a lot of coworkers who should have been here as well.
It's on YouTube.
But there are some of us who we stand along with you, and I'm aware of my white privilege. I am.
Yeah.
And raising a black son, I hope that I instilled something in him.
Yeah, well, the question is he going to be the kind of black person who advocates for black people?
I hope so. He lacks in a little enthusiasm now, but I think I've made a good example out of myself for him. And I try to do right in my community, and I couldn't do it with some of my awesome coworkers.
Good.
I couldn't have raised that child who came from Katrina without my group of people. Yes,
there's out of a hurricane. Or where are his parents?
His mother came here, but she went back to New Orleans, and she gave her rights up, and he just didn't have it. I met him at school. But yes, there's horrible disproportionality.
Yeah,
horrible.
Yeah. Well, I suspect the mother didn't have a $60,000 a year job. But it's horrible, and it's not going to get better without a political intervention. And for us to get the quality of political intervention we need educators to teach history.
Yes.
We need to.
I feel like every day when I say the pledge at school, I lie to my black kids.
Like, this ain't for you. Yeah, no, this isn't.
You don't have to say the pledge.
You don't. Well, I usually stop at there's liberty and justice for all, because there's not. But thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
I do have to scoot out.
No, it's fine.
But thank you so much for putting this out there.
Yeah, and email your friends. Send it out
will.
to the lists. And, this is a good discussion. We need to talk about, if you leave here without anything, understand that this ideal of femininity is a class marker. People aspire for it. And then we're actually teaching non-black women. So we're teaching white women to aspire for the moral authority, the ability to teach others, and lay claim to their vulnerability and weaponize it strategically, in the outer world. And then black respectability politics, and Newman talks about this, is and that's a form of patriarchy, because you're still under men, but that only makes sense because you're in control of savages. Your job is civilizing savages, whereas their job is to order and control them. Your job is to civilize them. And it's still it's a deal with the devil that's attested to in history. So we need to teach that kind of history, and we need to teach that it's a class marker, right? The story will run, if I could give the full story, that egalitarian relationships were marketed and put forth as uncivilized, right? So you get women going out of their way to attain this position of civilizer of savages. And that is a problem. When I hear a sorority girl talk about philanthropy, that's what that's what we're talking about.
My eyes were wide awake.
It's a class.
Woken up having a black son.
Right.
There have been many a times I've taken my white lady self in somewhere and people are all of a sudden listening, be it healthcare, the juvenile court system.
I didn't know who you were. I thought you were somebody else. You got a white mom? Well, okay.
But thank you. That's all I'm going to say.
No.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're gonna let's take one or two more. Thank you. Yeah, come on. The microphone. That's a class marker. People aspire for it, and that's a problem.
Thanks. Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, what's up?
You mentioned T-Splost, and because it's relevant and coming up soon, I just wanted to ask you about it and add it to the conversation. Because it seems to me from what I've read that it's a legislation that's going to further benefit the wealthiest in the Athens community and further marginalize people of color and people living in poverty, because it's this sales tax, which is a regressive tax, and how it's going to disproportionately affect people who are already living in poverty.
Well, so T-Splost is a transportation bill that, depending on which numbers you see, will actually bring money from the collar counties into Athens for transportation things that we have, needs that we need. My problem is the process, right? So we carved up black neighborhoods without asking black people where they want their trail. Or whether they want it through the neighborhood or maybe the problem is what's going to happen with the T-Splost money, with the sales tax money. Are we going to use black contractors to cement people, and are we?
Is this area going to see any of that money?
Is this
Right,
but it's going to see it in projects designed by people who don't live in this area for this area, right? So that's a political problem where it's white people deciding what we need. For example, people talk about affordable housing a lot in Athens. Athens actually has great affordable housing. We just don't have jobs. Athens actually has jobs too. We in this area, in the triangle, we don't have jobs. So the problem isn't affordable housing. The anti-poverty program we need is to create pipelines so that black people who grow up in the projects right outside, know that if I do what I'm told, I will get a job at this middle school. We need to create robust pipelines. We have jobs in Athens, like I said, north of $8.5 billion GDP. It's just a distribution of that. We'd rather give money to our cousins in Winder than we would actually spend it in black people who live in Athens and who've always lived in Athens. So it's a political distribution. And so I worry about the political distribution of the T-Splost money. I'm going to talk about that again next time, but I'm going to get a counter view. Adam or Brianna, you guys are pro T-Splost, right? Mm-hmm. Brianna, Adam, you already talked. You want to talk? Actually, even if you don't want to talk.
No.
Not because you don't know or because you feel shy?
Because I feel shy.
Oh, no. See, this is no, get your ass up here. No, this is a problem. I'm an introvert.
Okay.
Yeah, you're confident. All right, what do you got? Yeah.
Okay, you want me to talk about T-Splost? I don't know as much about it as some other people in the room.
Right.
Yeah, so my understanding is that, as you were saying, it will bring in outside money into our county that can be used for transportation projects, some of which I think will benefit everyone. But something I was reading just last night, actually, in 2012, there was a T-Splost referendum up again, and the NAACP had opposed it because they didn't have anything, They didn't have a provision in there saying that those jobs generated by the T-Splost would go to black folks. So I'm wondering, so if it passes, is it then too late for us to say, okay, now that it's passed? I'm thinking,
it's
can
never
we
gonna
organize
be too late,
around it
but
now?
We've lost black people have lost leverage. So this happened in 2012. This was the sticking point in 2012. Yet there was no course correction because fuck black people. There was no this was what kept it. This is what kept it from being passed in 2012. We could have had it. We just needed to bring black people into the decision-making process, but we don't want to share power with them. So that's a standing problem. That's a standing problem. Thank you for coming. So yeah, that's an issue. It's not going to be too late if it passes, but we lose leverage.
Yeah.
We lose leverage. Thanks for coming, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. All right. Take care. One more. All right, who's going to cut it? One more question, comment, concern?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, what's up?
And it is, do you know what the percentage right now is in Clark County of black teachers versus white teachers? What's the percentage?
Broderick?
It's 80-20.
80% black?
White.
Yeah,
Yeah, 80% white, 20% black. And administrators?
I don't know administrators.
Well, administrators matter too. Probably, I assume probably about the same.
Administrators is pretty close to like 40, 60 or something like
Okay, that's good. And 54% of the students, I know that. 54% are
And then the
black.
superintendent,
The superintendent, yeah. Superintendent and like half
Yeah.
the school board.
5 board members, the assistant superintendents.
So it sounds like we have a larger percentage in the upper range than we do at the teacher level.
At the teacher level. Yeah, but this is
that
new.
Yeah, is that maybe historical? thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of advocacy that turned the appointed school board into an elected school board, because when it was appointed, nobody appointed black people, but when it was elected, it turns out we won some elections. So, but I mean, there are deeper problems when like we have a populace that's so uneducated about racial history that in order to be electable, you need to be Obama, who pretty much went on 2004 and lied to white people, and you guys ate it up. We love him. There is no black America. There is no white America. No, that was a lie. Mercer Baratheon said, no, that's not only a lie, it's dangerous. So like the problem is we need the quality of white electorate who can handle the quality of black truth about America. So like I actually think that real political leaders create electorates, they don't just kowtow to them. So, you know, like I actually think that like we need political leaders who like aggressively say like, actually no, we're going to move money into the black community, and like some white people. A rising tide doesn't lift all ships all the time. We're gonna lift some black ships. We're gonna lift some black ships. So like, and plus, honestly, like if you build a real black middle class in Athens, that means scores go up because scores are tied to poverty. Everyone knows that, just nobody cares. You create a black middle class in Athens, scores go up, property houses stabilize, and then all those people who paid 1 1/3 price to live in Oconee for whiteness, like they have to take a haircut because housing prices in Athens like stabilize and awesome, and our schools are awesome. So like, not all black faces would 4% is to groom. So like, you know, we need. Anyway, thank you for your time. What's your name, sir?
Steve Williams.
Steve
I'm
Williams,
sorry.
Steve.
And
Steve.
I broke it, I guess.
No. You need Steve brought food.
Oh yeah, there's food.
So that's about the NCAA sport. Oh, we're back on? We're back on? Oh yeah, we're back on. All right, show's over. Thank you for coming. Next week we're talking football and the use of black bodies for white profit. And hope to see you then. Friday, 4 o'clock. Peace.